Hare Krishna. This is Vidyananda Das. You may also know me as Ethos Ananda. That's my website and my YouTube channel and my brand and all my other stuff. So welcome. Today we are going to do kind of an experiment. This will also be my first ever Bhagavad Gita slash scripture class or sermon. And yeah, it's definitely ballsy that I'm going to do this experiment on my first ever class. But first, I want to say that I respect your time. And so check the video description below for timestamps. So if you want to skip ahead to the more interesting parts, like the end of this introduction, for instance, that's totally fine. But this introduction is quite important because I'm going to do something that you will never see people do, most likely never see people do in any church or temple or mosque or any sort of religious institution. However, this style of using the scriptures is, as far as I know, an ancient mystical practice which is beneficial and effective and so on. So, for those of you who are, for better or worse, quite institutionalized and you like a very standardized way of doing a class on the Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture, I will try to respect these great texts as best I can and still give you something that's useful for you. And of course, for those of us who are just hungry for God, no matter what, I think you'll find this is quite beneficial. So what I'm going to be doing is scriptural divination. So this word divination, in English, we mostly use this word to describe the process of like finding water underground, where you like take two little rods and you close your eyes and you walk around and the rods will point you to where the water is. So this process of divination is really interesting because you have to kind of impose a artificial blindness on yourself in order to see something, which is, counterintuitive, but guess what? It actually works really well. So I'm going to be doing that same thing with scripture. In the future, I'd like to try this with the New Testament and the Quran. I actually have a physical copy of the Quran here, which I might try soon. That'll be really fun because I've never read the Quran, so that it would actually be perfect for that. Now, I'm not looking for water in these scriptures. I'm looking for bliss, knowledge, immortality, and so on. The usual. Oh wait, isn't that what I already am? Yes, I'm a bit forgetful. Please excuse me. So, I will start by doing an invocation prayer, which is mostly just for my own benefit, just to get myself in the right state of mind for this. But if on top of that there is some sort of spiritual power or demigod or God himself who can, grant me the fortune and the grace to do a good job with this, then that's great too. But I mostly need to do this for myself to get in the right state of mind and take this seriously. Although it is an experiment, and although I am a funny person who likes to have fun by nature, this is no small task that I'm about to undertake. So I'm going to do an invocation prayer, and I will start divining the Bhagavad Gita. This is a freshly opened. You can probably see how shiny it is. I literally just took this out of the plastic wrap. Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada, original edition. We don't mess around here. 1972. Macmillan, I think it's called. Macmillan is the publisher. Anyway, so I'm going to pick a random page and a random verse and just go with it. Now, this is, of course, the opposite of what you see in most ISKCON temples and most churches, and maybe not churches, but probably in mosques. They do it how we do it in ISKCON, where you have a specific chapter and a verse for a specific day, and then the next day is the next verse, and so on. And also, we often will use Sanskrit. We'll read it word by word in Sanskrit, repeat it many times, and then get to the English. I'm not going to do that. I love Sanskrit, but I don't speak Sanskrit, and I'm not in India, so it just doesn't seem to make sense for me, unless I need to, because sometimes there are many words that you just can't translate into other languages. So for really key, important words, it's often beneficial to see the literal translation and then extrapolate from that into a more colloquial translation. But even still, once you get the translation down, you should probably stick with English because that's what we're speaking here. If you want to see this same lecture in Russian or Chinese, you got to go somewhere else or translate it yourself. I don't know what to tell you. So for those of you who want to look on with me, or if you don't have a Bhagavad Gita, you can go to asitis.com. That's what you're seeing on your screen here. It's really simple. The whole Gita is for free here. It's the same one I'm looking at, the 72 edition. So you choose the chapter. You got to choose a chapter first, and then the verse drop-down menu will update, and then you can choose the number for the verse. Really simple. I guess that's it. And if this does offend anyone, I'm sorry. That's not what I'm here to do. I am here to give a new way, a fresh perspective on things, and something that you can try for yourself. And it's really fun because, it's fresh. Every single time you do it, it's fresh, and it's like, opening a present. You don't know what you're going to get. I've only sat down to do this a limited number of times, but I've never done this on camera before. And like I said, this is a fresh Gita. I just opened it out of the package, so this will be really interesting. You can join me in the invocation prayer if you like, or not, or skip ahead. Up to you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavad Gita. My favorite book. Oh, I'll never forget when I first saw you. You just materialized on my kitchen countertop. Never heard of you before, and there you are. This page looks nice. But which page? There's 2 pages here. Left or right? Let's see if I get a sign. Might actually be better if I don't touch. Just let some energy in my hand kind of come through. Yeah, I like the left side here. Well, that's so funny. So my left side, I felt something right here, and right where I felt it was covered the whole verse right here. So we are in chapter 10, texts 4 to 5. Yeah, I'll bring it up on the screen here. Make sure to use Brave, guys. the opulence of the Absolute. That's the chapter name. Intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, self-control and calmness, pleasure and pain, birth, death, fear, fearlessness, nonviolence, equanimity, satisfaction, austerity, charity, fame, and infamy are created by me alone. So for those of you who are total noobs here, me is of course Lord Krishna in this text. Yeah, this is a very relevant verse. So as some of you know, my work with Ethos, that is the ethical system as outlined by Aristotle, is and how that relates to the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, it couldn't be better. And this verse is the summary of what Ethos Ananda means. That's why I chose that name as my brand name, because both are here simultaneously. So a lot of what Krishna is mentioning here, these are virtues. Not all of them. I mean, like pleasure and pain is not a virtue, but it's what mediates all the other virtues. So if you feel pleasure by being humble and you feel pain by not being humble, that means you have the virtue of humility. If you have pleasure giving money and wealth to others and you feel pain at not being able to give money and wealth to others, you have the virtue of generosity. And birth and death, these are events and like, just parts of this material body that we have. So Krishna is all over the place here in a good way. Non-violence, that's a cardinal spiritual virtue. Equanimity, that's like responding equally to happiness and distress. That is a virtue that you very rarely hear about in the Western world, ancient or modern. But this kind of equanimity, which typically corresponds to detachment, is very common in Buddhism and Hinduism. Charity, austerity, those are more like spiritual virtues. It's really interesting. He says intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion. Like those are three separate things, but they're all very synonymous with each other. Let's just go into the Sanskrit for a bit. Intelligence is buddhi, knowledge is jnanam, and freedom from doubt is... Oh, interesting. So in the word for word translation, it's just freedom from doubt, but in the colloquial, the translation I first read, it's freedom from doubt and delusion. So it's really interesting how Srila Prabhupada will sometimes stress certain words to stress them, to show that they might have some more importance. That's asam moha. So I don't know asam moha, I've never heard of that before, but buddhi and jnanam, these are very specific words in Sanskrit that have very specific meanings. And I think when we use knowledge in English, it is not a good enough translation for jnanam. It's like, yeah, it's good enough. But like Veda also means knowledge. So what's the difference between like Veda and Jnanam? But Buddhi is much better either way. So Buddhi is like, that's what I'm looking for with what I'm doing right now with this Scriptural Divination, this seminar, whatever you want to call it. And Buddhi is the actionable intelligence that it's not just, be vegetarian and then you have better karma. It's how do you be vegetarian? How can you be vegetarian when you've grown up your whole life eating meat? How do I actually stop this practice? How do I control myself in order to actually do this practice and gain the benefit from that? So that's buddhi. And that's the very first word in this verse. So once again, very telling. And this is why I love this divination practice, is because it's like fractal. It comments upon itself, commenting upon itself ad infinitum, which is the natural law. That's how God works. That's how this universe is organized, and that's how you know you're onto that good stuff, man. So basically, here's how I see it. You have all of these different virtues and all of these uh, different parts of our reality, and Krishna as Bhagavan, or the Supreme Lord, is saying all of this comes from me alone. So if you want to have these virtues, or if you want to transcend things like birth and death, you got to go to Krishna. You got to go to God. There's no way around that. There are hacks. Like you can get really good at self-control and calmness, and maybe intelligence too, but you're still struggling with forgiveness and some of these other ones. You can get pretty good at this stuff from many different kinds of practices, but once again, it's very significant how the words are organized here, how many different words there are. There are so many different virtues mentioned here in this precise order to show us that it's very carefully designed. This reality is very carefully designed by Krishna, and he's telling us this to glorify himself, especially. I mean, because we cannot glorify God if we can't see the glory in him. And so this is one reason I've had a real strong taste for the Bhagavad Gita more than any other text, more than other Vedic texts, more than Aristotle's text. Like it's the number one text in my life, and I'll never find something better than this. I'm quite certain of that. Especially because of how short this is. There's only 700 verses. Oh my God. This is just like a 2.5 hour conversation that you can derive all the secrets of the universe for, basically. What was I talking about? Oh, so magnanimity. This is what Aristotle calls the ultimate virtue. And God, especially as Krishna, is the epitome of magnanimity, which is when you are great, you have the virtues, you have the power, you have the beauty, you have all of these things. And more importantly, you know that you have all these things and you demand to be treated accordingly. So one reason for Krishna saying this, I think, is he's saying, look, it's not just one great thing that I'm making. It's all the great things, and it's all the great things as they come about. All of that is by my design. And once again, he says intelligence first. And this is also significant, because why are most people reading the Bhagavad Gita? To increase their intelligence. So I think he's saying this thing first because it's the attraction. It's to bring us in further, and then further down the list you see, pleasure and pain, which is very mundane. Like, why is he even mentioning it, right? And then birth and death, and the very last one, fame and infamy. So this is really interesting because for many of us, especially in material consciousness, why do we want intelligence? You may think it's because you love knowledge and all this stuff, but actually, for most of us, it's for fame. What we're really looking for is for our ego to be better than other egos. That's one of the, especially for intellectuals. I mean, come on, guys, you've met people like this who they use all the big jargony words, and they love showing how intelligent they are. Why? Is it because they're actually that intelligent, or because of their ego and their desire for fame? And so infamy, the opposite of fame, that's that's something we really want to avoid. As for me personally, I know how dangerous both of these are, fame and infamy. So I don't actually care about either of these. Like pleasure and pain is another good example. Like there are good and bad pleasures. It's not all good. And there are good pains. Oh yeah. You're in like a martial arts class and you're working really hard and your muscles ache the next day, but you could feel your body is being carved into the masterpiece that it's destined to be. That's a glorious pain, which I pray for, actually. All right, so back to ethos. So Aristotle says that, you know, what are virtues? They're states of character, and what does character come from? It comes from habits. What do habits come from? Behaviors. So that's virtue. It's first you do something, then you do it again and again till it's a habit, and then you just maintain that habit long enough until it's just second nature. And that is a state of character, and we have good states of character, virtue, and bad states of character, vice. Um, Now Krishna is rejecting that. He's saying you are not this autonomous being who has complete control over all of your virtues and vices. We do have quite a degree of freedom and free will, but ultimately, in the beginning and the end, this all comes from Krishna. So, for example, I have the freedom to choose to practice bravery, to practice brave actions. But in that moment when I begin the brave act of talking to a girl, that used to be, a brave, like I would see that as bravery. Now it's like I just don't care about girls, so why would I, I mean, I guess if they're like stupendously beautiful, I'll be a little anxious, but typically not anymore because I just don't care. But as soon as you begin this act, whatever act it is, if you're practicing bravery, you pick up your sword to fight someone else, you will feel some elements of pleasure and pain. Your body will react in a certain way, which in that moment, guess what? You can't control. That's from previous habits and whatever else. But in that moment, here's the important thing, because look, obviously, if you trace back any stimulus to its original cause, you get to the original cause of the whole universe, which is God. So you can do that with anything. And what's the ultimate beginning? It's God. What's the ultimate end? It's God. And that's exactly what he's saying here. But in that moment, to actually be good at bravery and to win at this, it doesn't work when you say, I'm practicing bravery, and I notice I've been a little scared, but it's no problem. I'm going to keep on doing it. This doesn't, it works, but it's not as powerful as surrendering to the moment. And that moment is facilitated by Krishna more than we facilitate. The present moment is something that's just happening. We can never control it. We can control only our own response to the present moment. But the present moment itself is all that is. And past and the future, these are essentially illusions. And so this present moment, who is in charge of it sounds so funny. But the more present you are, the closer you get to God and God consciousness. And so Krishna is giving us a way to get not only closer to Krishna, but closer to being present also. I could keep going, but for now, I'm going to just see if I can find another nice verse here. Go a little faster. I like the left side again too. All right, we are on chapter 14, text 22 to 25. Wow, really interesting. We're getting these multiverse texts. Wow, what are the odds of that? This whole chapter, there's only one that has 3 verses all put together. Oh my God, it's a long one. The Blessed Lord said, "He who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, nor longs for them when they disappear, who is seated like one unconcerned, being situated beyond these material reactions of the modes of nature, who remains firm, knowing that the modes alone are active, who regards alike pleasure and pain, and looks on a clod, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is wise and holds praise and blame to be the same, who is unchanged in honor and dishonor, who treats friend and foe alike, who has abandoned all fruitive undertakings, such a man is said to have transcended the modes of nature. Once again, really awesome verse here. There's a lot of knowledge nectar here, we might say. So the one basic word to summarize all three of these verses is equanimity, especially from the previous verse we looked at. That's what Krishna is talking about here. Responding equally to everything, good and bad, happiness and distress. What's the example he uses? Pleasure and pain. Yeah. Praise and blame. It's funny how that rhymes. Honor and dishonor. So this is one of the main differences between the Bhagavad Gita and the Ethos text from Aristotle. The Ethics, as it's called, but I call it Ethos. I've been rebranding that. So honor is something we value and we search for a very good reason. And dishonor is definitely something bad, and it's more bad the more honorable you are. And even Krishna himself says in another verse somewhere that to an honorable man, death is better than dishonor. It's in the maybe chapter 2, I think. So this is why Krishna is the transcendental Lord, because there's a lot of these contradictions here. They're logical contradictions, but from a super rational position, they're not contradictory. They're true at exactly the same time. Achintya Bheda Abheda. So, in the material world, which is the world Aristotle lives in, and his followers are like myself. I'm still a follower of Aristotle. I still seek excellence within this material realm, but I'm also combining it with this. Actually, this Bhagavad Gita supersedes the Ethos and Aristotle, but I still try to combine them as much as possible because I figure, why not be excellent in the material and the spiritual world? Of course, if you want to be the most excellent in both, this is almost impossible. If you want to be the most excellent materialist, you might have to go against God. And if you want to be the most excellent spiritualist, you will probably be looking at a miserable material life, like, for example, Lord Christ, who was tortured to death in a heinous way, and many other martyrs and other people who have gone to, like Gandhi. I mean, you could say he wasn't the most spiritual, like maybe he wasn't a spiritual practitioner, maybe he's more like a political figure or whatever, or a leader, like a national leader more than a spiritualist, sure. But he did go on the spiritual path and suffer for it greatly. And of course he ended up being assassinated, and he starved a lot. He voluntarily starved himself, and that was a spiritual undertaking that it seems like gave him great spiritual benefit at the expense of material comfort. So it's if you want to be the best in both, that's kind of impossible. But what I'm doing, which is also very difficult and a strange thing to even have ambition for, is to be pretty good at the material world and pretty good at the spiritual world too. That's what I think I've already achieved and what I hope to continue achieving, but maybe not for long, because I know how great Krishna is. So if he wants me to suffer more materially, to lose more of my wealth, and to be arrested and whatever else, I mean, I'm already ready to accept it. It's just a matter of will it happen or not, or I can't really control that. So, how do we transcend the modes of nature? We transcend them, according to these three verses, by responding equally to them. And this is really important, because it's the same as detachment, as emotionally or psychologically detaching ourselves from the outcomes of our karma, of anything that happens when we're working and someone says, "Oh, good job," and we say, "Oh, no, 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 you know, that process of detachment that says, I just did my work. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad." And then if they say bad job and you say, "Oh, well, that's okay. Next time I'll try and do better." Like if you're practicing detachment, you're not going to get emotionally or psychologically or spiritually worked up over this stuff. But detachment's a very vague. It's not vague. We know exactly what it means, but it seems like there's many different ways of detachment, and the main one here that we're talking about is equanimity, is not just detaching from what's happening, but being equal to everything that's happening. So when you are responding equally to everything, you'll probably be detached, but it's taking detachment a level further. You could even say that so when you do detach from the material world, that doesn't necessarily mean you have become attached to the spiritual world. But it seems like when you're responding equally to everything in the material world, you have a footing from which to approach an attachment to the spiritual world. Let me see if I can explain how. So, the material world comes from the spiritual world. So, responding positively and equally to everything in the material world will presuppose that, in a way, you respect the material world. Not in the sense that it is this really good thing, which it's not. It's just a big golden prison of toilets. But or illusions, or the Matrix, or there's all these different analogies you could use for it. A simulation, whatever. That's the material world. But we're here for a reason, and it's it's kind of like when I was going to parties in college. I would go to the party just so I could leave the party, so I could leave in a cool way, like, yeah, it's not that good enough for me, yay. That's what we're here to do in this whole material world, is we're here to leave. Now, how you leave is really critical. If you leave with hatred in your heart, saying, "Oh, this place is full of crap and I'm better than all this," that's not going to work. That's going to suck you back down here again. And if you leave in the opposite extreme, "Oh man, this world just beat me up and I can't figure out how to do anything right and this and that." Well, you'll want to figure out how to do it right, and bam, just like that, you're incarnating again into this world. But if you're responding equally to everything, this is kind of like an alpha male position where you're like, you know, see, I'm the way I'm making sense of this in my head that works is I'm interpreting it in terms of like social behavior, and not as a theology thing at all, really. But like, if you look at the material world as a person and the spiritual world as a person, and the material world is like yelling at you or loving at you, and you know, she's like a little girl, basically, a little crazy. Um, and she's really attractive, she's really cute or whatever, and playful and lovely. So, you want to play with her, but the more you see her face, her real nature, the more you see, like, you can't be a part of this. You can't be attached to it. Whereas the spiritual person, he is equal. He's doing something else, but he's not against the material world. He's outside of the material world. So he can sometimes play with the girl, or not play with the girl, or discipline the girl, or love her, or say goodbye, or say hello, or anything. And it just won't matter, because he's not living in her reality at all. And that's why he's in a transcendental or superior reality, is because he can do anything in the material world with most times a moderate level of success with very little effort, because he can see clearly everything she's doing, because she is at the whims of the modes of material nature. And that's how we're enslaved in this lifetime. It's mostly the material nature and the modes of material nature, especially the three gunas: passion, ignorance, and goodness, which is everywhere. It's all around us, like the foods you eat, the thoughts you have, like these are all mediated and modified by these material modes. And so regardless of what kind of spiritualist you are, if you're a jnani searching for knowledge, or a bhakti searching for devotion and love, or a karmi looking for perfection in action and work, when you're able to transcend the material modes in this verse by being equal, responding equally to all of them, it's like a superpower. So that next spiritual thing you want to do becomes so much easier. If you're, say, a jnani, you want to learn the truth of all things, and you're no longer bound by the material modes, you're no longer bound by the ego that says, oh, if you learn this one and tell all the others, then they're going to think you're so smart. If that voice in your head isn't there anymore, then you are genuinely trying to find the truth, then you can just start researching the truth. And as soon as you see you found the right mark, you'll say, oh, that's the right mark. And as soon as you find something that doesn't look accurate, you say, oh, that doesn't look accurate. You see how you just instantly become grounded in truth. And likewise with bhakti, which is more difficult in many ways. But so sometimes when reading the Bhagavad Gita, or doing kirtan, chanting, dancing, honoring food that's been offered to God, a lot of these spiritual practices can be really blissful and easy, but is it materially blissful or spiritually blissful? That is the key. And when we respond equally to all material things, at least, when we try to see the material things for what they are and always respond equally to them, it becomes way easier to see, oh, I am tearing up in this kirtan because I'm imagining some stupid thing that isn't related to Krishna, versus, oh wow, I'm choking on my voice and I'm tearing up because God himself is inside me, like desperate to come out through me, or whatever else. So this is transcendence. This both of these verses that I've read, but especially this one, this is really a guide to how to transcend the material nature. The first sentence is really interesting. He who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, nor longs for them when they disappear. So that's longing for attachment, being attached to attachment. So that's the extreme example. And so Krishna, like every other great teacher, is giving us the exaggerated extremes so we can easily see where the golden mean in the middle is. And that's wisdom, that's rationality. That's what these words actually mean. So for everything that we look at here with Bhagavad Gita and also with the Ethos of Aristotle, you can, if you're using your rationality, what does that word rationality mean? It relates to ratio. You're looking for a ratio where there are two extremes and finding the intermediate condition, or to use Krishna's words here, the equal position, the position that responds equally to everything. That's wisdom. That is also transcendence. Because when you're in a polarizing situation, you're stuck. You're enslaved to that do-all nature. So you have to get out of that somehow. And you can do that by going to the middle, by responding equally to both. That's one way you can transcend. There are other ways to transcend as well. But for now, that's it. Please leave a comment below and subscribe to this YouTube channel, which is brand new. There's nobody here yet. And share with your friends if you like this. And that's it for now. Hare Krishna. I'll see y'all next time.